Thanks. There we go. It's really good to see you all again. So I don't know, how many of you are familiar with spiritual direction? Have you ever heard that term before? Yeah, the board. Yeah. So I guess that's where I'd like to start is what is spiritual direction? Because I had never heard of it. So as a student over at United, I originally started in the fall of 2018. I was told it would be a 3-year journey, pretty easy toward my Master of Divinity, because I'd originally come to be a UU minister. That's what I wanted to do. I got my start in Connecticut at All Souls UU Church in New London, and I just fell in love with every aspect of congregational life and of serving, and that's what I wanted to do. When I got to United, they were going through a whole bunch of growing pains. And then on top of that, as a self-directed student, because of a lot of the growing pains, I've changed tracks 3 times now. And in 2020, the pandemic hit and it changed everything, right? It changed all of our lives and how we saw the world and interacted with the world and interacted with each other. And I was ready to be done with school because I was like, the world is in pain, the world is hurting, and I feel useless sitting here in school when I should be doing something. So I had a conversation with Sarah Smalley. I don't know if some of you may know her. She is an ordained UU minister. She was our student liaison for a while at United. And it was July in the summer of 2020, and I had made an appointment to talk to her because I was going to quit. And she said, okay, so let me ask you, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? What does your dream job look like? And we started to talk about that, and I wasn't exactly sure what it looked like, and I can't even remember verbatim what I told her, but she says to me, what about spiritual direction? Have you ever thought about spiritual direction? And I was like, what is spiritual direction? And that term it sounds so formal, direction. I am the director. We will be directing this. And I really loved what Chuck did with it in the title of the newsletter. What is your spiritual direction? That was a play on those words and a twist that I was like, hey, that was kind of neat, because as students of spiritual direction, a lot of us are really uncomfortable feeling like we're telling you what to do, because that's not really what it's about. So the idea that we're going in a particular direction and we're going together, I really liked, and that really resonated with me. So in a nutshell, I guess, spiritual direction is the practice of being with someone as they attempt to deepen their experience with the divine or the sacred in order to learn and grow on their own spiritual path. And so, as you can imagine, it means different things to different people. And so at this point today, I've finished all the classes, and I completed my master's project and everything last semester. All I have left is practicum, or practical service, where I will be checking in with the supervisor and getting in a certain number of hours and that sort of thing to complete my degree and certification. There is also Spiritual Directors International, SDI, I think .org is the website. I have to look that up for sure. But you can find out a lot of information there. There's videos to watch. They have newsletters, and you can find a spiritual director in any faith tradition that you're interested in there. And so once I become certified, I get to be listed there and have my information out. And while we've talked about the challenges of Zoom and technology and all of that right at the moment, one of the things that being able to do this virtually means is that I get to talk with people all over the world, all over the country. I currently work with people down in Florida and North Carolina, and I've also worked with people over in Utah and Idaho. Um, so it's really fun to be able to connect with folks that you may not have connected with if we weren't doing this. Um, so spiritual direction is actually one of the Catholic Church's best kept secrets. It started there in the 4th century. There was a theologian named John Cassian, I think that's how you say his name, who provided some of the first earliest recorded guidelines to Christian spiritual direction. And that is where a lot of this particular ministry started from and is documented from. There are some theologians that even take it back to the Bible and talk about how Jesus's mentoring of his disciples is the earliest forms of spiritual direction. So my background is in Christianity, but it's also in paganism and now Unitarian Universalism. And so this allows me to look at this process a little differently. And it was kind of fun because when I started in the fall of 2020 over at St. Catherine's is where the spiritual direction program is through. They work in conjunction with United to do that. Well, St. Catherine's is Catholic, right? Most of those people are Catholic. And so I remember the art of discernment was the first class that I took. And we were going through talking about our backgrounds and faith traditions. And so you have UCC and you have Catholic and you have Methodist. And I was, you, and everybody's like, okay, how do we do that? And so we spent the next couple of semesters, because now they have more UU students in spiritual direction classes than they have any other faith tradition, which is really fun. So I got to be a part of the language changes. Last summer, Cynthia Bailey-Mans, who is the program director of that, she totally rewrote the curriculum because the language and the things that they used were very out of date. They were very patriarchal in nature. They were very gender in nature, and they were very Christian in nature. And she says, this is not good. If we're going to help the world, we have to be able to talk to everybody. And it was really fun to be a part of that. We learned that in the process of that, we learned that there's a lot of not just Christian, but the Greek and Russian Orthodoxy have a form of spiritual direction that goes back a long time. And Judaism and Sufism, they also have a long history of spiritual direction. So it's not as Catholic or as Christian oriented as we may have believed. So then we look at our liberal faith traditions. And it's necessary to take a different perspective when we set out to accompany someone on their journey. The UU communities that I've worked with and served have had a wide variety of people. And I've worked with, we had an atheist group at All Souls in Connecticut. So, which was really interesting because most people, when you say you have atheists that come to your church, are like, what are you talking about? And so we get to offer perspectives that the others may not notice coming from their particular faith tradition. After my first sermon at All Souls, I'll never forget, this woman came up to me and she was like, oh, I loved your message. It was so good. But I've never really considered myself a believer. She said, thanks for talking to us today. And I was like, okay, so why do you come here? And she says, oh, this community, these are the best people in the whole world. And I was like, oh, she had 4 kids. They were homeschooled. She homeschooled them all. her husband worked in New York and commuted from Connecticut to New York. So a lot of times when they came to church, it was just her and the kids, and she loved the people, she loved the community. And I said, well, it sounds to me like you're a believer. You believe in this community. You believe in us enough to allow us to nurture your soul and that of your family's souls. I said, that to me is belief. And she's like, I'm gonna have to go home and think about that. And she gave me this big old hug, and we became really good friends because our kids were of the same age, and she just kept coming to talk to me after services and things. And that's the joy and the honor that I find in being able to journey with people in this particular modality, because we get to look for what is sacred. And I guess that's the word that I use the most, because I have worked with, so in 2015, I became a life coach it was shortly after I started serving at All Souls. And I used the term spiritual life coach before I really knew that was a thing, because that's what I like to work with people on. And I worked with a lot of people who had gone through some sort of religious trauma of some kind. And so words like God and the Holy Spirit and things like that make some people very, very uncomfortable. So we get to sit down with people and we get to define what their words are. Humanists that don't really believe in a God or theology of any kind, they rely more on the human spirit and the human community and that sort of thing, and that's what they define as sacred. And then atheists, I've heard some really interesting definitions of sacred from people who don't really believe in much of anything, so they say. And it's been really interesting to walk with people and to learn about what they believe is sacred. And so the benefit of spiritual direction then is that you get to walk with someone who sees differently than what you do. And in practice, and also with my own spiritual director, because that's part of the program, is I have to be in spiritual direction myself. Because one of the first things that they teach is self-care, which is very interesting to me. There's not a lot of educational institutions or programs that will tell you, first and foremost, you have to take care of yourself, because you can't give from an empty cup. And so in those experiences, the perspective that I have been able to glean from walking with someone else sometimes is amazing, and always is humbling. And it's an honor to be able to have someone else look at something that I'm so emotionally attached to and involved with, that I can't see the whole picture, and they see it from a completely different angle. And all of a sudden there's a gift in there, there's a lesson in there, there's something that takes the ease, or that takes the pain off of it. It makes it a little easier. And that's not to say that spiritual direction is always used for crises, or if bad things are happening and that sort of thing, because there are a lot of people that actually seek out spiritual direction just because they want to deepen their relationship with the sacred, because they want to feel more connected, whether it's connected to their fellow humans or connected to something like God or the universe or whatever they call it. They seek that out because when we walk together, we get to co-create amazing things. We get to see things that we might not have seen otherwise. We get to hold space for the messiness of our humanity. We get to hold space for the amazingness of our humanity. We get to hold space for a lot of those things that in everyday life we take for granted, we miss, we don't take time for, especially in our society today. Even with the pandemic and everything, we still have really busy lives. We're still trying to fill that time. We're trying to figure out what normal means and how that all works. And spiritual direction allows us to take a moment to really sit and honor ourselves and honor our own paths and ask for companionship along that path. And one of the other things that spiritual directors do is we explore spiritual practices such as meditation, Lectio Divina, Audio Divina, which is one of my favorite ones. I can't sing a lick, so I love listening to other people sing, and Audio Divina is the idea of listening for that sacred movement in music and in lyrics. And it's one of my favorite spiritual practices and breaks from the world. Labyrinth walking, mindful prayer, intentional presence is another spiritual practice that we talk about because a lot of times we're distracted in this world. We spend time on our phones or doing something else, constantly checking our email, constantly in 4 conversations at one time via different devices and all that kind of stuff. Spiritual direction, those moments are all about you. They're quiet, they're contemplative, they're sacred in and of themselves, right? And giving yourself that space and that gift of being able to look for that in your own lives. So as a seeker, it's really about what you want to get out of spiritual direction. And when you sit down, usually the first couple of sessions with one-on-one spiritual direction, you take a little bit of time to get to know each other, to establish language and covenant. As a director, my promise to you is this, my hope that you can give to these. We have to do housekeeping things like be on time, and if you have to cancel, give me notice and all that kind of mundane stuff. But then the other part of it is, what do you want to get out of it, and what would you like to covenant to do? Because there might be a particular thing that you're working for, or you might just be seeking, and you just want to be able to give yourself that time and space to seek. And then typically we meet once a month because it takes time to process. The human mind is a very interesting thing. And so when we look at things from a different perspective, we have to have time to process, to move, to change, to accept, to decide we're not going to change if that's the thing that we want to do. And so as a spiritual director, that's the other thing we can do, is we can help with accountability. And let's say you wanted to add more spiritual practice into your life, we can talk about that. We can give journaling prompts. My spiritual director has given me a couple of really beautiful meditations. One is about grounding and one is about holding other people's stuff, because we don't have to hold other people's stuff, which was a really interesting conversation for me. I knew that it was true, but to have it spoken about in that way was really interesting. So, and different people do spiritual direction differently. Some people, there is a Jewish spiritual director that she's also a writer. So she specializes in group spiritual direction, and her way of doing group spiritual direction it's really amazing to watch. There's a lot of quiet time. There's a lot of contemplation, and you can kind of feel it in the air and see it in the participants' faces and things. It's just a really beautiful noticing of things. And then there are other directors, especially when you're doing it one-on-one, that it's more of a dialogue, and there's a lot more back and forth, and there's a lot more perspective being exchanged, questioning going on, and that sort of thing. And the questions are always about what we notice. They're always about wonderings. They're always about the seeker and what your path may be. It's not the same really as counseling, and it's not even really the same as pastoral care. Although we do have, one of the requirements that we have is to have a list of resources, so that if we do come across somebody who is in need of those different kinds of services or support, I have a list of people that I can refer you to for that sort of thing. So that's another part of what we do. So I guess that's just a little bit about what spiritual direction is, and what we can use it for in the world. So I think at this point, we're going to have a moment to reflect and ponder as Chuck plays some music for us, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
So we can take time if you like to have some congregational reflection and thoughts. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, Barbara, as part of your um, learning and the program, you're offering individual spiritual direction to anybody who wants to do
Mhm.
that, right?
Individual or group, if there's, two or three of you that would like to come together um, and explore some things together, that's good too. Actually, group spiritual direction is gaining a lot of ground right now. People are feeling very unsafe in the world that we're living in. And so to be able to gather some close friends and come and explore what their future looks like and how that all is actually happening more and more nowadays. So that's good too. And then one-on-one for those that are more comfortable with holding that kind of sacred space for themselves.
Awesome. Anybody have any thoughts they want to share or questions?
Yeah, Barbara, I'm just wondering if without breaking any confidences, if you could give us some examples of conversations you've had, questions that your clients have had, uh, just a little more concrete picture of what spiritual direction sometimes encompasses.
Like I said previously, and it's more that Cynthia has said, you've already been doing this, than it was that I knew I was doing it. But her favorite example is the one client that I had 2 years ago. She was very deeply traumatized by the Christian church. And but she knew there was something inside of her that was like, I know that there's something out there. I don't know if it's God. I don't know if I don't know what it is. She said, but I know that there's something. And she said, can you help me figure out what that is? And so together we would journey. She'd come, in for a session, and she'd say, okay, so over the last month, this is what I experienced. And I didn't feel connected. This felt terrible. I didn't like this. And so then we looked through some of those things, and where was that human experience versus a divine or connected experience. And I don't know if that's really very, very helpful or not. But she was trying to figure out how she could show up in the world, having been traumatized by one faith, and still be a person of faith. And so she ended up getting to a place where she was very comfortable saying, yes, there is something bigger than me out there, and it is here to help me, and I don't have to be a part of the oppression that I learned as a child and through my early adulthood and that sort of thing. Let's see. There people who are looking for discernment. They want to, like, I had a gentleman who was offered a job 3 states away. Do I take it? Do I not? I have a wife. I have 3 kids. How old are they? Where are they at in school? What is that move going to be like for them? Will my wife be able to find another church community? Will I be able to spend enough time with them? Yes, the pay is more, but so is the cost of living in the state we're moving to. So as a man of faith, it's not just about me and what I want, it's also about my family and how do we do that. And so one is a very spiritual example, and another is a very practical example. Is that helpful? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, those are helpful examples. And I'm thinking you know, how it certainly it has a lot of similarities to any therapist or counselor, anything like that. But I'm thinking of a lot of counselors or therapists, especially if they're part of a larger organization, sort of have a rule that they can't go in that spiritual direction. I know a friend of mine who's is a therapist. She left a larger organization and started her own company because she wanted the freedom to talk about her faith and the role of faith, and she couldn't do it
Yeah.
Under the larger Minnesota, whatever it is, umbrella.
Mhm.
And I understand that, because you don't want to go to a counselor and start getting preached to if that's not what you're looking for.
Right.
So, and she has a lot of clients who just love her. It's working out really well for her. But I can see where someone who maybe is looking for, or maybe is just open to more of a spiritual approach to life,
Mhm.
might really have a benefit going to someone
Mhm.
like you, where they know that that's a possible element.
Mhm. Well, and that's a good point, because people do ask, what's the difference between what you do and what a therapist does? And the biggest thing is, I come into a session with the idea that I don't know any more than you do, that you are the expert of your own life, and that you have everything you need, that you were born with everything you need to navigate this life and to do what you want to do with it. My job is to help you uncover those things. My job is to help you remember those things. It's not to tell you how to do it or to offer advice or anything like that. I mean, I can teach you spiritual practices that might resonate for you. I had a client more recently that she was a coaching client, and meditation was not her thing. She couldn't do that. She says, so how else do I do this? So we went into some very intentional breath work, doing more or less walking meditation. So it was still meditation, but her eyes were open. She was doing something she loved to do, like walking, and she was focusing on her breath while she was doing it. So I guess that was a form of advice, but not really. And I do know what you're talking about too. I have a friend in Minneapolis who is a therapist, but she's also a Reiki practitioner, and she also does healing with stones and things like that. And she's struggled with bringing her faith and her other gifts into her practice, and has gone into private practice and had to put things in place so that her Minnesota licensure isn't in jeopardy because of bringing her spirituality into it. And what her noticings are over the last 2 years, in particular with the pandemic, is that more and more therapists are moving toward and recommending some sort of spiritual guidance instead of therapy, because sure, they can offer different skills and that sort of thing, but they're not really allowed to help you anchor into whatever that divine connection is for you.
One thing I thought of right away at the beginning of your talk was that it ties so closely to two of my favorite of the 7 principles, and that is acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, and also a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Yes.
And so it seems to fit right into the basic values and principles of Unitarian Universalism. So I think that's cool.
I think so too, which I thought was very interesting, that Unitarian Universalists are kind of one of the later faith traditions to really get into and pick up spiritual direction. So, because I feel like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense for what we believe.
Yeah. Right.
With the 7 principles and everything. Absolutely. I also think of the inherent worth and dignity of all beings because of that whole belief that I don't know any more than you do. It's just that I can help you see things from a different place and help you remember, discover, or uncover things from a different perspective. Other questions or thoughts, opinions? Look, Holly's got a friend too.
My friend wants to say,
So if any of us are interested in connecting with you and trying this process, what is our next step?
You can feel free to send me an email at coachbarbaramay@gmail.com. And I would be happy to get together just one time to answer curiosities or wonderings. Like if there's any part of you that says, I wonder if this would help me with this, let's get together and talk about it.
So I think I got that right. I put it in the chat, Coach Barbara May at, if I spelled it right.
Yep, that's it.
All right. One thing I'm struck by is how many different things can be a spiritual practice.
Yes.
One of our first trips to Camp Unistar, I've told this story before with this group, but the Camp Unistar has usually two different classes, kind of whatever you call them, that you can join in on. And the week that we went, our second year that we went, the week was drumming and sailing. So you could sit in on drum sessions, or you could learn to sail. Or and I thought, oh, I really want to learn to sail. But the first day I wasn't really in the mood, so I'll see what the drumming is like first. And I got so into it that I didn't ever go into the sailing sessions. So and it was just really hypnotic, and it's hard to explain what happens in that setting. And we've had the leader of that was Jamie Meyer, and we've had him do Sunday services when we were meeting in person. It'd be kind of hard to do drumming over Zoom, but at least community drumming. But anyway, and there's just so many, walking meditations and just being in nature and paying attention to what's going on in the present, all kinds of things. It's just amazing. Is there any other comments or questions? Well, great. Thank you, Barbara. That was informative. And just FYI to the congregation, the council is doing at least one more session. We had a session this past Tuesday, and we will be doing that again in about a month. And we'll be in communication with all of y'all when we figure out, what's going on there. So thank you. In the way of benediction, I think Kathy would like to share a song with us that Vocal Point is doing in our concert next week.
Yep, here goes. Make sure I'm unmuted.
Right.
This is called The Road That Leads You Home by Benjamin Cornelius. May the road you travel on be the road that leads you home, to a place that's bright and warm, to the place where you belong, where the winter snow falls softly and the summer skies are blue, where the laughter's light and easy, and the tears you shed are few. May you have what you're in need of, with a little more to share. May you find the place you long for, and may those you love be there. May the road you travel on be the road that leads you home, to a place that's bright and warm, to the place where you belong, where the winter snow falls softly and the summer skies are blue, where the laughter's light and easy, and the tears you shed are few. May you have what you're in need of, with a little more to share. May you find the place you long for, and may those you love be there.
Thank you, Kathy. That was lovely. And thank you all for being here. We can start our morning coffee time now. Feel free to hang out and continue to chat about whatever subjects come to mind. And it's great to see you all. Have a great week.